Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant to bring you another React video. Specifically to another of fellow content creator Gamza's videos matching starships from Warhammer 40k against those of other franchises. Also have a coffee link and fourth wall link in the description if you want to support the channel. And I just introduced a fun new mug to the merch store that you can see on screen here, so if you want one, check out the store. Alright, on to the video. I previously tackled Gamza's video on why Star Trek ships stomp ships from 40k, and that had some fair play issues that I wanted to confront. This time, though, he's tackling a matchup of Star Wars against 40k, so this should be entertaining. Now, in fairness, I'm far less familiar with 40k than I am with Star Trek or Star Wars, partially because 40k is intentionally incredibly inconsistent, and a lot of the lore is like, okay, well, there's the tabletop stuff, and then there's different information for the video games, and then there's completely different information from the novels, and none of it is particularly consistent. But I know enough for government work, and I have a strong sense of fair play, so without further ado, here's why Star Wars ships totally stomp Warhammer 40k by Gamza.
Why, hello there everybody, and welcome to this video. So today, I've got a heavily requested one for you guys. That is going to be Star Wars versus Warhammer 40k, the old classic debates, right? But today we're going to be talking about the ships, and that's going to be a Dictator class cruiser from Warhammer 40k.
This is going to give me an epileptic seizure, and I don't even have epilepsy.
Imperial Star Destroyer from Star Wars. But first, it's time to show support back to all the dudes that give me support as well. From my Patreon, a shout out to Soulbreaker, the last man alive. Thank you, my good man, for everything that you've done for me in this channel. Guys,
we all love our supporters.
If you want to join the Patreon for any of the tiers, you get to jump on our Discord. There is a private room for just the Patreon members, and you guys get to discuss things about the lore. Sometimes I also put down little snippets from codices and stuff like that from Warhammer 40k, so that way you guys can kind of see where I'm basing a lot of the stuff off when it comes to the lore. You're more than welcome to join in on the debates and anything else like that. But without further ado, let's continue. Alright, let's go ahead and talk about the Dictator class cruiser here. We've got a biggie boy. But then again, what in Warhammer 40k is not over the top and gigantic. So when it comes to this one, you're looking at a little over 5 kilometers long. So a pretty big ass ship.
So it's interesting because in the last comparison, he pitted a Miranda class, which is pretty much bottom shelf Star Trek ships, versus an Emperor class battleship, which is a carrier. He then proceeded to not bring up any of the fighters that carries and got all hung up on like how transporters would interact with void shields. So for this, he is pitting it sounds like an Imperial 1 Star Destroyer against a cruiser, which might be because he would probably match a full-on battleship against a Super Star Destroyer. That could be his mentality here, so like putting the similar classes against each other. We'll see what he says about it, but I just find it interesting that he pitted the bottom shelf Trek stuff against the top shelf 40k stuff, and in this case he's actually kind of equalizing it a bit. We'll see.
Now, too, when it comes to the crew members, you're looking on average around 85,000 people on the ship. That is a lot. And if you guys have read anything from the Battlefleet Gothic books, I'll tell you what, these dudes live like rats on a ship. They are just packed into these rooms. All right, now let's go ahead and take a brief look at...
Yeah, 40k likes to solve all of its problems by just chucking a lot of manpower at it. They don't do a lot of automation, so like, oh yes, we have a crew of thousands of men loading this round into this turret, as opposed to we have an autoloader and one dude hitting a switch. But whatever. At
the Star Destroyer, we are looking at 1.6 kilometers long.
That is not a Star Destroyer.
About a kilometer wide. So while it's slightly wider than the 40k ship, it's definitely not as long, so it's shorter. Now, as for the crew on this ship, about 45 to 48,000 crew members on this ship.
Whoa, okay, so yeah, what kind of Star Destroyer is he talking about here? He really needs to focus in on that, because they vary wildly in what they're capable of doing.
Everybody's getting the sardine treatment on these damn spacecrafts.
But Gamza, why don't you talk about the weapons?
Ah, don't worry, I'll talk about the weapons just right now. We've got
He's
the
only a minute
Dictator
in.
class from 40k, macro weapon batteries. They're from the port to the starboard to the broadside. It's all over the damn place, okay? Both these ships have weapons everywhere. That's the best way to put it. But the main concentration of the weapons on the 40k ships you're going to see are on the broadsides. So we've got macro weapon batteries. We've got gun decks, all kinds of shit like that. We got torpedo tubes. You've got lasers on some of these. They can be outfitted with a lot of different things on them. At least to say, they're just both loaded with lots of weapons. You also have flight bays on this one. This is why I chose the Dictator class cruisers, because this one releases a lot of dogfighters, if you will.
Well, that's weird. Why did he talk about the fighters in this one and not the last one when it was a dedicated carrier? He is totally right, though, that 40k tends to focus most of its weapons on the broadside, and then they fly up next to stuff and just hammer it to death. They do have front-facing weaponry, but it's a lot more limited than their broadside, at least generally speaking. I'm not familiar with the specific vessel that he's talking about, so I'm going to have to take him at his word. But, yeah, mix of macro batteries, torpedoes, lances. Those are the lasers he's talking about, are lances. He's a 40k expert. I don't know why he's not using the specific terms, whatever. But yeah, all that pretty much jives.
And the Imperial Star Destroyer is very similar in that as well. It's just a 40k ship, a little bit larger, has a bigger crew, etc. Now, when it comes to the Star Wars ship, the Imperial Star Destroyer, you're talking massive batteries of turbo lasers. Then you've got ion cannons. You've got all different types of heavy turrets. And the cool thing, too, is that they also have tractor beams as well. The best way to summarize both these ships is they are both loaded with weapons all over the damn place. With Warhammer 40k, they tend to be more concentrated on the broadsides. When it comes to the Imperial Star Destroyer, they tend to be more evenly displaced around the whole damn ship.
Yeah. So, interesting thing about the design of the Star Destroyers, because they're a big triangle like that, if they are facing their target, they can bring basically 100% of that weaponry to bear on the same target, because all the turrets can rotate to fire forward. If they are side by side to something, they can basically turn half of those turrets towards that one thing, and you get to use half of the entire ship's firepower as a broadside. They also, depending on the type you're talking, like an Imperial 2 has weapons that are specifically set up for broadsides, so those cannot fire forward, but they do enhance the broadside.
Yeah, that's nice, Gamza, but when are you going to start talking about the fighter crafts these big-ass ships hold?
Let's go ahead and do that right now. So, when it comes to the Dictator class cruiser from 40k, this is where things get all over the dang place. And so, number one, the official book when it comes to Battlefleet Gothic, you're looking at maybe 32 fighter crafts that are coming on these ships. Now, in my personal opinion, that is way too low. That doesn't make sense of why a ship would only hold that amount of crafts. I'm going to guess it should
small,
be at least
considering the size of the ships.
into the hundreds. Maybe about 140 to 200 is where I'm going to crank up those numbers, because that seems more realistic when it comes to Warhammer 40k. It's possible that they could hold less. It's possible that they could hold even.
Okay, so that actually annoys me. I get that he thinks that a particular quantity of fighters is unreasonable in some way, but you have to actually back that up. Just because it doesn't make any sense to you doesn't mean that's the way it's not the way it is. So, like, take a modern day cruiser. It's like, well, this is a cruiser. It's the next best thing to an aircraft carrier. It should surely carry a whole bunch of fighters. No, it has a helipad because the rest of the ship is dedicated to other stuff, not carrying aircraft. The fact that it can land aircraft at all is actually kind of surprising for a cruiser. So he is talking about a cruiser here. Yes, it has a relatively minimal complement of fighters. That could be perfectly reasonable because that's not what the cruiser is designed to do. This just happens to be a cruiser that can carry some fighters. That doesn't mean it's going to carry a lot. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that it can carry, what is that, 4 or 5 times, between 4 and 5 times the number of fighters that is listed. But unless he actually has a source on that kind of thing is just like, okay, you can't just make up numbers because they feel better.
more, but I think that that's a good balanced approach. I think the number giving about like 32 to 36, that just seems way too low. Now, what kind of ships is it carrying? It's carrying Stormhawk bombers and Fury interceptors. Now, it does have a couple of other crafts,
Nice gray
but
box
they're
there,
not
pal.
that
Thank you.
important. These are the two main ones that I'm going to focus on here because these are the ones that can actually do some significant damage in the actual fights. Now, when it comes to the Imperial Star Destroyer, their numbers are a lot more easier to go by because it's just basically 72 TIE fighters or interceptors. So at that point, it becomes a lot more even, and that's also why
No. That's not how that works. A Star Destroyer, again, he's not talking about the specific kind, but if you look at the tech documents, if you look at the wiki, whatever, you will see that they carry a standard complement of this many TIE fighters, this many interceptors. It'll be something like a 40-10 split for TIEs and regular TIEs and interceptors, plus a bunch of bombers, plus a bunch of AT-ATs. They have a standard complement. Heck, let me Google it right now. Imperial 1 Star Destroyer. There's the armament. Complement. 48 TIE fighters, 12 TIE bombers, 12 TIE boarding craft, or 12 TIE interceptors, 5 gunboats, 15 Delta-class Stormtrooper transports, couple Imperial Gamza-class cruisers is part of the complement on a Star Destroyer. So yeah, they have this long list of things that you can have. You mix and match with that. This is why when I'm doing my own comparisons, I do the Imperial 2. It's a lot more dialed in. And yeah, 28 AT-ATs, 30 AT-STs, etc., etc. They actually list these complements. It's not just swap this one for this one, and that's how it is. So, in any case, it's 40, 50-ish fighters on the Star Destroyer.
bumped up the numbers a little bit more, because if an Imperial Star Destroyer is carrying about 72 of these crafts, and then you've got a Dictator class that's over 5 kilometers long, only carrying 32 ships, it just doesn't make sense. Now the fighters, when it comes to Storm...
As I said earlier, it can make perfect sense if that's not what the ship is for.
Stormhawk bombers and the Fury interceptors, they are larger than the TIE fighters, so it would make sense why you can fit more TIE fighters on an Imperial Destroyer. But the ship being over 5 kilometers long, you should at least be able to hold 100 to maybe 200 of these fighter crafts.
That's nice, Gamza, but what kind of weapon do these fighter crafts have?
All right, that's pretty interesting, and it's actually very simple when it comes to the TIE fighters. It's pretty much just multi-mounted laser cannons up on the front. And on the interceptors, they can have it like on the wings and stuff. It's super basic. You got laser cannons. Some of them have more laser cannons than the other laser cannons. There you go.
Yep, totally accurate. TIE bombers also have laser cannons for some reason, despite being incredibly sluggish, but they also carry bombs. A little bit misleading. Most of the time in Star Wars, when they say lasers, they don't mean lasers. They mean blasters, which are basically plasma cannons. The ways that they're described generally make no sense, but because they'll be like, oh, it's a particle beam, which is a bit like saying that, I don't know, that if you, that tracer rounds from a rifle are thermal weapons because they glow. No, they're a kinetic weapon that just happens to be glowing. That's different. They're plasma weapons. Turbo lasers and the quote-unquote lasers in Star Wars, they're all just plasma cannons.
That's it. When it comes to these Stormhawk bombers, you're looking at anti-tank crack missiles. Then you've also got plasma bombs that they can drop on you. And then on the forward guns, they have las cannons, or they can have multi-lasers and stuff. They're pretty modular on the weapons they can have, but it's all pretty much standard by that point. Now, the Fury interceptors, which is a faster craft, has 2 forward-facing las cannons, and then they also have 4 anti-fighter missiles that they have on their ships as well. All right, let's go ahead and talk about...
And as we get to see repeatedly throughout the movies of Star Wars, missiles are a big deal. They're really, really effective unless you happen to be a Jedi.
The shields, because this is another huge topic of debate where people just get all crazy and they start foaming at the mouth and shit. So at this point, both these big-ass ships have big-ass shields, and both their shields are pretty darn powerful. So when it comes to void shields, which is we're going to be on the Dictator class cruiser, you have multiple shields that are stacked. These are void shields. Now, it takes multiple hits to knock these shields down. Once they do get knocked down, it takes a little bit of time to regenerate and pop back up. When it comes to the Imperial Star Destroyer, the shield actually tends to be more robust and it regenerates faster. So you actually have to get in hits a lot faster in order to start damaging the hull. Now, I know a lot of people like to debate, you know, how many
gigatons can this shield take?
Oh, my voice.
Okay, pausing right there, because one of the things that he, maybe he'll mention it, I hope he'll mention it, but he hasn't so far, is the fact that Star Wars shields, there's 3 kinds. There's magnetic shields, which you'll see over hangars, you can fly right through them. Heck, you can see some right on the screen right here. Those are magnetic shields. Basically, all they do is retain atmosphere. That's it. You can fly right through them. There's energy shields, which you get to see probably most clearly demonstrated in Phantom Menace when the Gungans are using energy shields and you can just walk right through them, but all your projectiles will get stopped. All ships that have shields have those. Then there's particle shields. Those will actually stop munitions and, physical projectiles. But they're much more limited. So like a X-Wing will not have particle shields at all. It will have energy shields. And the way that I've, based on what I've been able to dig up regarding particle shields, they're extremely limited and they tend to hug the hull. So if you were to tie it into Star Trek, it would be basically like a really powerful structural integrity field. You are enhancing your armor through shields, but you're mostly relying on the armor because the shields are just kind of enhancing it a bit. They're not actually doing that much, which is why things like asteroids will totally wreck Star Destroyers. So the fact that 40K is using a lot of physical munitions versus the Star Destroyer in this case, that's actually a big deal because they'll basically bypass the shields entirely. Well, except for the particle shields and the armor. But yeah, you get what I'm saying.
Shield, that's impenetrable. Nothing can destroy it. It'll fly into a sun and it'll just dissipate the energy into the warp.
It's like, yeah, I got it. Yeah.
My Imperial Star Destroyer, you can set off 10 trillion nukes and it'll just eat that stuff for breakfast.
It's like, all right, relax, guys. Just being straight up with you, the Imperial Star Destroyer does have stronger shields in terms of how much it can take sustained damage. The Void shields could probably take more damage when it comes to one solid brutal hit. But that shield layer gets dropped. And then once all those layers get dropped, now you're vulnerable and you're kind of sitting there. So
another distinction to be made is that Void shields will actually stop basically everything. How exactly they operate is inconsistent. Like a lot of, I think the rationale that makes the most sense is basically that they're a dimensional barrier that shifts things into the void that make contact, but they do have a couple limitations. So one, they will stop energy, projectiles, whatever. But if those things are moving slowly enough, they'll go right on through. So fighters can leave without having to drop the shields, but that also means fighters can get in without having to drop the shields. And slow enough moving torpedoes can get through, but they're slow moving, which means that you can intercept them.
when it comes to like maybe a single powerful blast, the Void Shield will take it. If it's sustained fire, then the Imperial ship will basically win that battle because the regeneration of that shield is a lot better. Now, when it comes to the Warhammer 40k ship, if the shield drops, does that mean it's entirely vulnerable? No. It actually has quite thick hull plating, if you will, and it can take a lot of punishment as well. So just because the shield's dropped doesn't mean that it's
both
just
sides
instantly died.
really love their armor.
Now, when it comes to the Imperial Star Destroyer, it's pretty much the same thing. These ships are both built for battle. They're basically just tanks in space. All right, go ahead and wipe that foam from your mouth. Leave your comments below, but let's go ahead and talk about something that I think is severely left out in all of these discussions like all the damn time. And in my opinion, it's actually more important than the weapons themselves. That is speed and maneuverability. What does it matter if you've got the strongest weapon in the entire galaxy, but you can never hit anything with it because it's too slow and cumbersome? All right, so when it comes to ships, one of the main things is speed. Everybody knows that. Even in our modern day, when it comes to militaries, speed is absolutely vital. Now, when it comes to at least acceleration speed specifically, we actually have some official numbers. Oh my gosh, they actually did it. So when it comes to the Dictator class cruiser, 2.5 Gs when it comes to its acceleration. I'll explain
That's
this in a moment. When it comes to the Imperial class destroyer, okay, 2,300 Gs. Okay, that's a whole lot different. All right. So
Okay. What? That acceleration can't be right, because at 2.5 Gs, you would need years to accelerate to the kind of speeds that they're actually doing maneuvers at. That can't be right.
2.5 Gs on the Dictator class, 2,300 on the Imperial Star Destroyer. So what this is essentially saying is that when you put your foot on the gas, the acceleration of your ship is that much. So what does this actually mean? Essentially, it's like saying that on the Imperial Star Destroyer, when you put your foot on the gas, you're gaining tens of thousands of kilometers an hour gained per second. When it comes to the Dictator class ship, you're gaining 88.
I mean, I'm looking at the wiki right here, and yeah, acceleration, 2.5 gravity's maximum sustainable acceleration. What?
One of them's gaining tens of thousands, the other one's gaining just 88. So you can see that the acceleration difference is quite significant, and there's a reason behind this though. Now, when it comes to the fighter craft, this is also very important too, because, well, the whole point of dogfighting is to have speed in the air, right? So TIE fighters are coming in at about 200 kilometers a second. The TIE interceptors can go from anywhere from 240 to 300 kilometers a second. That's really, really fast. This is like, these numbers are...
So in space, I don't care what your top speed is, because that really doesn't exist aside from when you get into relativity ranges. What does matter is acceleration, and he is right that TIE fighters are wicked fast. According to the wiki, they can accelerate at 4,100 G. So, yeah, they're pretty zippy.
Disgusting. I want to throw up just listening to these, okay? Now, when it comes to a Fury interceptor, now I'm trying to be as generous as possible as I can here. The Fury interceptor is about 50 kilometers a second. The Starhawk bomber is probably about 30 kilometers a second. Now, why am I being so generous here, and what is this all about when it comes to us actually facing off here and going into a war with each other? That is inertial dampeners. That is the biggest technological difference that we can see here when it comes to maneuverability, and this is where the shell begins to crack. Inertial dampeners allows TIE fighters to pretty much do insane speeds and crazy maneuvers that would literally liquefy you. It would turn you into like red applesauce inside the cockpit, right? But you have inertial dampeners, which means that G-force is removed. When it comes to Warhammer 40k, these inertial dampeners, I'm not going to say they don't exist in all of Warhammer 40k, but across the Imperial ships, they basically don't have them. So
from what I've found, yes, inertial dampers do exist in 40k, but mostly on the larger ships, which means if you're on a smaller ship that doesn't have them, you're limited to basically 10G before you start killing your crew.
The way that they are described with the Fury interceptors is essentially that when these guys jump into these ships, they're wearing specialized suits to try to help with the G-force, and their spinal cord is like connected up to a bunch of like a tube full of a cocktail that allows their body to like take extra
maybe
G-forces.
A little higher than 10G then, I guess.
There's still a limit to that. One person is basically on drugs trying to amp himself up. The other one is not even subjected to these G-forces to begin with. So this is why these ships cannot go the speeds of like the TIE fighters or the interceptors or even the Imperial Star Destroyer itself, because the inertial dampeners don't exist. So this is why when it comes to actually putting all of this together and having these dudes fight each other, I gotta give it to you here, guys. There is no way, especially when it comes to the dogfights, there's no way that Warhammer 40k can even kill a single ship. I already know you guys laugh. I can just imagine the comments right now. They're probably just getting crazy. Like, damn you, Gamza, how come 40k always loses? I'm giving you a valid argument right now, okay? The inertial dampeners changes everything, because you can...
So, he's right that acceleration, top speed, all that kind of stuff, that matters a lot. However, the way that Star Wars fights is, let me fly up and broadside you, and in a broadsiding situation, only the 40k shields would actually do anything. I mean, except for against lances. War shields would protect against lances just fine. But basically, if they drive up next to the cruiser and start exchanging blows, the Star Destroyer is getting shredded very quickly. And once that's done, yeah, the TIEs can fly around and stuff, but it's not, yes, they can go ultra fast and all that, but it's lances in particular, they are firing, they're lasers, they're shooting at the speed of light. Their targeting is pretty good at close range. Yeah, they can pick off fighters just fine. I think that he's totally right that, assuming that he's totally right about, and I'm not finding anything to contradict it, TIE fighters would absolutely just be flying circles around Fury interceptors and that kind of thing. With that kind of speed discrepancy, I'm even inclined to think that the missiles being used just wouldn't be able to keep up with TIE fighters, because 4100G is really, really, really fast acceleration, and demanding that of a weapon that is designed to take down something that's maybe pulling 10, 15 Gs is a pretty big ask. But if the Star Destroyer is gone because it flew up, started exchanging blows, and then got blown up, none of those TIE fighters can actually hurt the cruiser. So they're in big, big trouble at that point.
Like 200 kilometers a second, and you're doing all these fancy sharp turn maneuvers. Dude, you're going to die. You're going to be liquefied in there if you don't have inertial dampeners. Warhammer 40k, you don't have that. So you're left with going at significantly slower speeds. And I'm being extremely generous when I say 50 kilometers a second is what that ship is going to be able to do. You'll still destroy yourself if you make a too sharp of a turn. But I'm assuming some dude whose eyeballs are about to pop out and he's bleeding at the face and the mouth, and blood's coming out of his ears and shit. And he's trying to make a turn maneuver, and while the TIE fighters are literally just doing Fruit Loops around him. It's just ridiculous. But okay, that's the dog fighters, right? What about the actual giant ships themselves? Now, it's not quite that bad when it comes to a speed difference. The main thing here, though, is the fact that the acceleration is so absurd that they can essentially be doing small bursts of acceleration around a 40k ship. It's like it's going to be so hard to try to hammer them with all of your weapons. Now, if you want to go back into this and be like,
"Little Gamza, what happens if they just line up and just shoot each other?" Okay, Gamza, stop talking about tactics and maneuverability.
It's like, all right. If they just sit there and they just blast the shit out of each other, I would still give it to the Imperial Star Destroyer. Now, why? Does this mean that he's going to walk away unscathed? No, I think he's going to take quite a bit of damage. But why would I say this? Because again, if we start bringing into the TIE fighters, remember, they don't even need to necessarily be dogfighting with these dudes, but let's just say that they did. I can see the battle going down this way. You have an Imperial Star Destroyer on one side, you got the 40k ship on the other side. They released all their little bombers and their fighters into the air. Let's say that you have maybe half of your TIE fighters engaging the 40k fighters, and they're just taking them out. They'd be taking them out left and right because they're going so much faster.
With that kind of speed difference, and the weapons would be perfectly effective. I really hope
that the 40k kids out here truly listen to this. You're going orders of magnitude faster, doing insane bullshit maneuvers in space that would liquefy people because you have inertial dampeners. You are flying loops around these dogfighters, and you're just blasting them out of the sky. They won't even see you. Okay, they're not even going to see you. You're going so much faster than them. But anyways, once you go past that, remember that if you slow down enough, I mean, you might even have a couple of dudes that crash into a void shield. Maybe they're going too fast, and when they go into the void shield, it just splatters them.
That actually is a really, really good point, that because the void shields will let things that are moving slowly enough pass through, that means that TIE fighters would basically have to slow to a crawl to actually get through the void shields because they're going too fast. Go figure.
Right? Maybe a couple of TIE fighters do that. But if some other dudes are actually a little bit competent and they slow down, they can go right through the void shields and start taking out.
But you slow down like that, you leave yourself vulnerable to the blistering point defense, and you die.
The different cannons and the turrets and stuff that they have, while the Imperial Star Destroyer is unleashing barrages and stuff like that. So I think that eventually, when it comes to the shields, the void shields would drop, The Imperial Star Destroyer shields would probably drop a little bit later on.
It wouldn't matter. As I said earlier, most of the shielding on a Star Destroyer doesn't actually stop projectiles at all. That's why fighters can get awful close and do things like what Poe Dameron does and take out all the turrets on the surface of the ship. You can't even shield turbo lasers because doing so would cause them to shoot their own shields. You have to leave at least the gun portion of them unshielded so they can actually fire. That, or you have to have rapidly toggling shields, which do exist, kinda, but yeah, they're not used like that. So yeah, basically all those macro batteries, all those torpedoes would go straight on through and hit the Star Destroyer's armor, which is formidable armor, but not that formidable.
But the shield regeneration takes a lot longer on the 40K side, which gives the Star Destroyer more time to just unleash more blasts into it and eventually take it out. Now, if it doesn't take it out, then both these ships are probably just going to destroy each other's, and then the only people that are going to live is probably the TIE fighters, and they'll just be flying around in space going, well, you know, at least I survived and I was more maneuverable. And then I guess you could say that they would win because the only thing that would be left is TIE destroyers floating in space while two giant ships just blew up and died.
Yeah, if both ships blew up, TIE fighters are not equipped with hyperdrives. They basically just go around till they run out of fuel and the pilots starve or run out of air.
So that's the way that I would see it. And again, that's if like the ships just sit there and stare at each other and start blasting each other apart.
Which I actually think is a perfectly reasonable way of looking at it, because if you look at Imperial tactics traditionally, they're awful. My favorite example to point to is in Empire Strikes Back. You have a couple gleaming examples. First, Admiral Ozzel gets choked to death by Darth Vader because he thought it would be really smart to surprise the rebels by jumping out of hyperspace really close to Hoth so they could actually get their shields up in time. And then later on in the same movie, when the Falcon is running away from a trio of Star Destroyers, those Star Destroyers try to do a pincer maneuver on the Falcon in 3D space, and he evades it by flying downward, the brilliant maneuver because space is 3D. Those three then ram each other. So, yeah, them flying up right next to a comparably sized ship to just duke it out with cannons, that makes perfect sense to me, actually.
It's impossible, Gamza. A single 40K cannon would blow the Imperial Star Destroyer out of the sky.
It's like, okay, yeah, whatever. If you want to go down that path, you can. I just don't see it going that way. I think the inertial dampeners is significantly, it's just such a stupid advantage over everything. Like the speed difference is so much better. Now, when it comes to like just the weapons in general,
according to my calculation.
I am curious about where he got the Star Destroyer acceleration numbers from. The only speed that they have listed is in megalights, which are made-up units that are used for, like, they originally were put out for, like, the VFX department, so they'd have a ratio of, okay, if the TIE Fighter is doing 100 megalight and the X-Wing is doing 80, that's the ratio of speed there, and then the Millennium Falcon is doing 110, and the Interceptor is doing 120, and meanwhile the Star Destroyer is doing, let me see what they list. 60 megalights, whatever that means. So, yeah, I don't know where he's getting his acceleration numbers for the Star Destroyer from, but whatever.
A turbo laser does this amount of damage, and it's going to hit into the side of the hull and cause
all that other stupid shit. Look at both these ships have crazy weapons that would likely destroy each other. And again, I'm gonna be straight up with you guys here. I'm giving a lot of favoritism towards 40K right now.
Turbo lasers are also not all that powerful, all things considered. They're powerful because an Imperial 2 is the one I always go to because they're a little more nailed down than Imperial ones. They have, I think, 60 dual turbo laser batteries, and each of those are firing 2 shots, so that's 120 bolts. Even if they're only hitting in the, like, kiloton-ish range, that's a lot of energy flying out. But if you're talking about cannons that are hitting for megatons or gigatons or whatever, it stops being all that impressive.
If you actually sit down and read some of the Battlefleet Gothic books, like the rule book, you go through the lore, all these other different things, dude, 40K ships still have entire squads of men hoisting up like macro cannons on chains. They're grabbing torpedoes, and they've got giant squads of dudes trying to pull these torpedoes into the loading tubes and stuff.
Why bother with automation when you have people?
How cumbersome that is? You're going up against a ship that has AI and automated systems that can just turn and start shooting. They do not sit...
No, actually, Star Destroyers don't have AI and automated systems like that. They still manually aim their guns too. And in fact, I was just looking at a tech manual thing on the Venator class starship, and they made the very bold claim that some of their turrets can actually turn entirely around in 3 seconds, which is glacially slow if you're tracking a target. I was honestly trying to find, because people claim, oh yeah, turbo lasers hit with gigatons of energy, and it's based on this Venator entry in the tech manual. I'm finding nothing about that beyond it saying they can channel their entire reactor through these turrets, which, if you can't quantify the reactor, then that means nothing. You're also assuming, there's a lot of assumptions that go into that, but in any case, yeah, the turbo lasers are not nearly as impressive as people think they are.
Here trying to reload stupid shit. So this is why I say like the technology difference is significant, not only in the scale in terms of like how fast that they move, but also how fast they can reload, regenerate their shields, all that other stuff. So once you start taking...
Incidentally, if Star Destroyers are in fact as fast as he's saying they are, and the Venators are super impressive because they can rotate a turret in 3 seconds, that means that the turrets on a Venator cannot track faster than the ship is moving. So you'd screw up your own targeting by moving too quick, which would be a problem. Hence all the broadsiding, probably.
All that into an account. I just think that the Star Wars is far more flexible and significant, especially with the inertial dampeners. But okay, guys.
Yeah, so I totally agree that inertial dampers are a huge deal, and in terms of the fighters versus fighters complement thing, that alone, I think, makes the huge difference. I think that the 40K fighters, assuming that he's totally right about the inertial dampers thing, they'd be screwed. They would not be able to land a hit on any TIE fighters. The TIE fighters would be more likely to actually accidentally ram things than get shot down. But for ship to ship, totally wrong. Both sides love to fly up and broadside stuff, so if they're doing that, that means that the Imperial defenses basically do nothing against most of the Imperium weaponry, and the Imperium weaponry shreds them. Meanwhile, turbo lasers can keep firing away at the void shields. Yes, they'll drop them eventually, but it'll take a while, and they'll be long dead by the time they drop the shields.
If you disagree with me and you want to say that a 40K ship would just turn around and ram it at light speed, yeah, I just make up whatever you want. I don't care.
Okay. Well, that was fun. So yeah. Again, with Gamza, some very good information and some very incomplete information. I, again, totally agree about the inertial dampers thing. That is a huge issue. But at the same time, you have to take tactics into account. And doing flybys like that for a Star Destroyer, first of all, not something that they would ever do. And second, based on the information I'm finding about turret tracking speeds, would actually mean that they couldn't hit anything if they tried. So, yeah. Plus, you have to get into weapon ranges, which is something he didn't bring up at all, which is a problem for 40K or a problem for Star Wars because 40K weapons have ranges in the tens of thousands of kilometers, and they can actually hit stuff at that range, versus turbo lasers have an effective range of 1,200 kilometers. So they have to get uncomfortably close to a ship that can shred them. So, yeah, I totally disagree with this capital ship versus capital ship matchup here, but with the fighters, I'm actually totally on board. So, mixed results this time. Anyway, what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. Again, I have a couple links to my Ko-fi account and my merch store in the description if you want to support the channel. And until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.